Welcome to 52 Miniatures. My name is Alex. This video is a bit different. I've been invited by my friend Build Making Stuff to a challenge, a cooperative challenge with many other crafters to make a junk bot. Essentially one of Bill's sort of fortes is gathering trash and stuff like that, building robots. He's made a junk bot generator. There's keywords here for each part of the body and, the head, the arms, the hands. And you roll a d20 and, you get different keywords for each thing. I've got body, speed holes. There's head, sorry, getting there. Grinder. And then we move on to arms. Fancy pants. Thanks, Bill. And hands. Electric hands. Legs, bones. And sort of themed for the entire build, asymmetrical. Some of the other words are like polished, Ronin, beaten, moldy, savage, holy, evil, jagged, too many spikes, unlucky, dirty, cosmic, weirdo, killing machine. Is that meat? So this is essentially inspirational words, only I have some issues. So first off is this trash thing, I build and paint miniatures, but very rarely do I build things out of trash. And there's a lot of people out there that do this kind of thing, so I thought, let's build something out of trash. I went into my recycling place. People throw their trash like recyclables and started digging around in bins. And I was like, wow, this could be something. And then I was like, ooh, that could be something. Inspiration really never, it didn't happen. I was also kind of wondering, what am I going to use this thing for? Like, I don't really need a robot. What I do need, however, is something for the game that I want to play, which is called a War Transformed. War Transformed is a sort of First World War war game. Weird World War I war game. I'll show you. Sorry, this place is a bit of a mess. A War Transformed, right? So in here there's some monsters that witches can summon on the battlefield. And there's one called Crusher, which is the sort of a huge kind of monsterish thing that can be summoned and essentially wipe everyone else out. And I thought, maybe I can do sort of like a magical sort of robot crusher thing. Essentially bits from the battlefield just sort of magically gets put together into a big monster. And it might look a little bit like a robot, but it's essentially a manifestation. So what am I going to build it out of? Not that dinosaur. I do like kitbashing. And so I realized I have, hi, I'm over here. Thanks, camera. I've got lots of plastic. I mean, trash is essentially things that you don't use, right? I'm not using this at the moment. And so this is potentially trash, old scale model tanks and bits and pieces. So I figured this falls into the category of trash, don't you think? Definitely trash. Obviously, I want to build something for sort of regular gaming, 28mm gaming, admittedly something huge that can sort of crush tanks and stuff like that. There's plenty of plastic to look through. I've got a miniature tent set. This is all 1/35th scale, so everything is obviously too large. But I figured, this panzer kampfwagen, which is actually a really expensive kit that someone gave me years and years ago, just used for bits and pieces. There's so much stuff in here that should be able to be turned into some kind of a robot manifestation, probably with the help of some green stuff. I don't really know where to start with getting the scale right, getting sort of the anatomy right, things like that. And so I figured I'd use something that someone else has done as a blueprint. This is a miniature I painted, which honestly I could use this as a crusher as well, but that wouldn't be much fun. And I made like a wire replica. So I got like a skeleton going, just using regular steel wire. So the point behind the armature is I can now actually change the pose a little bit if I want to, and not damage my, old original miniature unnecessarily. I'm going to start with the torso. This is a promising looking bit. Could have a head right here, some arms sticking out. Yeah. So grinder was a little bit tricky, but I figured, this is kind of grindery. And then I found this little face from one of the crew members, I believe. And putting that face into one of these things looks really creepy and weird. And we have someone sort of grinded. That's a weird face, right? I got the keyword fancy pants for arms. I don't really know what that entails, so I'm just going to say that that is exactly what I'm doing. The hands, however, said electrical, which is a little bit tricky until... Why did I ever buy telegraph poles? I don't know, but I have telegraph poles. I should be able to fit these onto my little weird hand here, and we'll have electrical hands, which is, this is actually rather cool. It's sort of like very vintage and weird World War I-ish. So I'm pretty stoked about the fact that I found electrical poles in my trash. When gluing this together, I've been using plastic cement. And also some joints, I've been using sprue goo. This is something I've made myself by dissolving sprue, all bits of sprue, into plastic cement. When dried, this sort of goopy goo turns into something as solid as your plastic. And I'm just doing this because if I'm going to be using this as a gaming piece, I just want it to be as sturdy as possible. And there's quite a lot of joints that probably might snap off if it was super glue. It does take time to dry though. And so now I'm just waiting for my sprue goo to dry. I found this box of human cavalry from Oathmark. There's some heads in here because I'm supposed to have legs with bones, and I don't think I can do bones, but heads is sort of, in a while they will become bones. So maybe I can incorporate some more of these weird sort of head, some more sort of these weird things going on with the heads, which is probably lost souls from the battlefield or something, into the legs. Just gonna glue this thing on that just fell off, regardless of plastic cement. I'm done. Do you want to see? I ended up just pretty much using the Panzer Kampfwagen kit, and there we are. It's a strange beast. I think using the keywords in some instances have been a success, like electrical hands. There's not many speed holes. There's no bones for legs. But these are all just guides, I guess, to get you going. And we have this strange, weird monster. I guess the trickiest thing was trying to get it to stand up, get the legs right, getting it not to sort of tip over. It still you know, it's a little wobbly, but it's standing. You should get a base maybe one day. But here we are, time to paint. I really should clean up before painting, but I figured a rather simple paint job, probably using a gray primer, going in with oil washes and staining it up like the pile of junk it truly is, a magical pile of junk, but nothing too complicated, I hope. So I primed green, and what so I primed it gray using a one-shot primer from Ammo by Mig, favorite primer. I'm then going to spray in sort of a zenithal fashion. That's using my airbrush, sort of going in mainly from the top, using a pale gray from AK. And then on top of that, I'll be using an olive flesh, I think. Getting a really sort of light pale thing going that I can then stain down. Staining always looks better. Shh. On a pale surface. So I've now got something a bit more interesting than just a grey prime, and I'm gonna dry brush this with white. I've got a white. As I said, I'm going bright because I kind of want to be able to darken it down. With this dry brush, I got one of these sort of floppy dry brushing brushes, but I put some water on a piece of tissue and moisten it first, and so it's sort of a dry brush, but it's with a sort of bit of a damp brush, and I don't mind if this gets a little bit streaky because we need some attitude going, and I'm just going to try and catch some of the edges with this and get some texture going. So it's sort of like getting a dry brush on the edges, but also adding streaks and texture. And because I've watered it down, that means it doesn't turn sort of stark white. You can see the scratches and everything going here. I don't really mind. This is supposed to look damaged and scarred because this is not a delicate piece of machinery. It's now time for an oil wash. I use oil washes because I just like working with them. This is a pre-mixed oil wash from Modeler's World called Industrial Dirt. Now, people usually have a tendency to not like oil washes. One thing is the solvents involved. I should be wearing a mask, but that means I can't really talk to you at the same time. And so, you know, normally I'd wear a mask because there's solvents in the air. One of the things a lot of people sort of disagree with oil washes, if you get past the stage of working with solvents, is drying times. This is the last thing I'm doing on this model today. And so by tomorrow, this will be dry. So for me, it's more about planning than how long things take to dry. My robot came apart. There was some weak glue points, and while I was rubbing around with the oil paint, things fell apart. I guess this happens when you scratch build things. It doesn't really matter. I'll glue it back together again. It actually made this a little bit easier. I've covered everything, as you can see, in this grimy looking oil wash, and I'm now going to rub most of it off by using some, this is not actually white spirit, this is their own sort of solvent, sort of white spirit, and this is the kind of stuff you clean your glasses with, you know, the fine cloth. And going to try and go over just the raised bits carefully, like this. Nothing fancy. And clean off a little bit of the oil wash on the raised areas. And then let all this dry for tomorrow. And then I can continue with the final details. Hi, this is Angry Alex. As it turns out, what I said about the fact that my glue joints were a bit weak was not true. For some reason, this stuff has been dissolving my glue joints. Now this makes me a little bit angry. Look, here's a head. I have a robot in pieces. That doesn't really make me all that angry. I can just glue it back together again. What makes me angry is that for quite a few years I've been trying to get people into using oil paints because I think it can be a handy tool. And many people are kind of scared about solvents and stuff like that, if it's going to damage the miniatures or if it's going to damage the paint. And the whole point of using white spirit, odorless white spirit, and oil paints is that they don't actually damage anything. But for some reason, this company has decided to make their own sort of mixture containing other things than white spirit. And for some reason, it's dissolved my glue joints. And that can make people scared of things like oil paints, which is a shame. So that's why I'm a bit angry. I'm now going to glue my robot back together. We now have an assembled robot again. Isn't that fantastic? Now I can show you what I wanted to show you, which is this grimed and stained robot. And you can now appreciate why I painted it so bright to start out with. It's looking kind of lovely. And I'm now going to just try and dirty it down even more using some acrylic paints. I've got something called a dark neutral grey and a burnt orange from Pro Acryl that I've watered down. And I'm going to use sort of a little spongy thing and stipple on scratches and just more mayhem. I dip it in my paint, remove the excess sort of on a piece of paper, and then go in and lightly, whoops, that wasn't lightly, was it? This is not working out. Okay, wait, let's go somewhere else. There we go. One has to be sort of, that's what I'm talking about. Be very light-handed. And we're getting these sort of sponge-marked dents and dirt. I'm going to do it with the dark grey first. Look at that. And then with the rust colour, kind of messed up a little bit here. I've kind of vouched with everything I'm doing for this War Transformed is to be a bit faster than I usually am when painting. So this is one of my first attempts at trying to not get too nitty-gritty about the details. You can see what I'm going for, even though it should have been maybe not as messy here. But with the rust on top of that, as you'll see in a bit, we should be fine. I forgot to mention that after I glued everything together again, I varnished this with just a matte varnish on top of that dry oil wash to make sure that this acrylic paint sticks nicely. We're now going for the orange, stippling. Let's see how that looks. So this is a representation of rust. And see? Magic. Magic happens. Magic. Pure magic. One of the few detailed things I'll do on some of these scratches with the brush, I can go in and paint on just a little bit of paint to add some depth to the scratches. I can also just do some thin streaks like this, looks like scratch marks or whatever, to get a bit of a variety in the damage. We're in for the final stretch of the paint job, and it's back to oil paints. And this time we're not using that other brand. It's just regular oil paints with some white spirit. And this is for the final sort of staining. So what I've got going here is a rusty red, a industrial dirt, which is sort of a brown green, and also a bit of toad green. I just want to get some green on the legs, like moss or something like that, just to get some color into this paint job. As you can see, I didn't bore you with the details of painting these little things, electrical doodads, and also just a little bit of skin tone and some kind of wash on the face there. Now, one of the reasons I love oil paints is because when working on an acrylic surface like this that has been varnished, you can paint stuff on like so, get some white spirit and start to feather it out. And if you don't like what you've been doing, you can just use the white spirit to erase things. If you really don't like it, you can get a Q-tip and erase. And there's no rush. This is not something that dries on you like acrylic paint. You can fiddle about, shape the paint just like you want it. We've got some lovely sort of oil staining. Same with the rust. We've got sort of a major piece of rust here. We can do some thin sort of streaks. Feather it out. Now with the green, just had this thought that there should be some kind of moss growing on this thing. I don't really know where or how, but if I just create sort of like a thin filter like this in some places, again, I can just thin it down, remove it. With the Q-tip, if I just think, oh wait, I went too far, I can soak it up. And there's just a hint of green. This will sort of, when it dries down, it'll become more muted as with any paint. But yeah, I'll just keep adding this all over the miniature. And then we're pretty much done. Maybe some dry pigments would be cool, but one step at a time. This is now truly a piece of weird World War I scenery. I don't think I've ever painted anything this battered before. And I'm going to finish off with some dry pigment powders. This is a green one and a sort of dusty one and a red rusty one. There's also a brown one over here. These are from Modeler's World as well. But, you know, it's just dry pigment without any weird solvents in there. My whole philosophy of this style of painting is just sloppy layer after sloppy layer. And there's no finesse involved. There's been no sort of detailed painting at all on this paint job. We're just attacking things vigorously. But in the end, you know, just every single little layer does another little something. And you end up with something looking pretty darn worn and torn. And we're done. Let's go have a look. My enchanted robot is finally finished, awaiting us here on the battlefield. And I'm very happy. There we are, battlefield. Now, this has all been a collaboration. Many more creators are part of this bigbotbash. There's friends of mine like, obviously Bill, but also Trent from Miscast, Dave from MS Paints. We've got Boylai Hobby Town, Nick from CC Minis, and many more that some of them are new to me, and for that reason I urge you to check out the playlist on the bigbotbash just to find new creators doing all these wonderful things, but also making very different style videos, all of them, and I found plenty that are really fun to watch. So please go do that. And now, the final images of this beast. And on the battlefield stalks the Crusher. Crush, the magically enhanced robot. I hope you've enjoyed watching me build this and paint this. Please remember to like and subscribe, it really helps. Check out the Patreon if you want to give some additional support. And thank you very much for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.